Since I got into Blender, I don't know how many years ago, I've wanted to make stuff like this. And for the first time, I was able to. I've compiled all the useful information into this one place for your convenience. This video is going to be a deep dive into how you can create panels, as well as hopefully some insight on why you're doing the things you do to achieve just that. That way you can replicate it without going to tutorials again. The most important part of any story is the characters. Let's start with that. I'm going with a medieval inspired panel, so I picked characters to fit it. If we hop on over to Sketchfab, there are a variety of models to choose from. These are the models I went with, and you can download them using the link in the description. You can leave the models as they are or fix them a little. I decided to change them to match better, so I grabbed a helmet model to put on the foot soldier. I reworked the texture for the knight as well because I wasn't a big fan of all the red tint. As for the weapons, I did some modeling, but also had some elements I'd made in the past for the swords and axes. We'll get to those in a bit. I wanted to make a shot of the main character, the knight, attacking and defeating his first opponent with perhaps some fighting going on around them. For that, we're going to need some animation. And I'm not the best animator, let's be real. If you don't already have a Mixamo.com account, you should sign up. And you can upload your character and get pre-made animations to download. It's pretty straightforward. But Mixamo didn't exactly have what I was looking for as far as custom movements went. So if you want custom movement, you can either buy a motion capture suit or maybe take a video of yourself and superimpose the model in Blender and try to line it up, but there is a simpler way. If we sign up for a Rococo video account, we can upload video, which the program can interpret as movement and apply it to a skeleton. Once that's done, make sure you have Rococo Studio downloaded, and it should have the animation in a project there. From the app, you can export your motion data as an FBX and then import it into your scene. But we're not done. You'll need to download the Rococo retargeting add-on, which is on their website. After you've installed the add-on, all you have to do is go to the Rococo tab, assign the source as the Rococo Capture FBX, and the target as the armature you want to receive the animation. Then build bones. Then hit retarget. If you get an error that tells you have duplicate bones, just find the duplicates and remove those if they don't belong. You can hit the retarget button again. Also, if you don't have a T-pose rest pose on the armature, then it will not look good and will probably do something like this. It's doing that because there is an inconsistency between the armatures and their bone orientation, and it just kind of guesses to make up the difference. To fix this, go to the first frame of the animation. Then click the Rococo rig and hit Ctrl and Tab to go into the pose mode, or you can just select it from the dropdown. Adjust the armature to closer to what the target's pose is. Now, without moving to any other frame in the animation, from the pose selection option, make sure you have the current pose selected. Hit retarget. That should do most of the heavy lifting, but you'll probably have to make some tweaks. If you want them to be holding weapons, which I'm sure you will, add the ones you're using to the scene. Put it in the soldier's hand, and then go over to the Constraints tab and pick the Child of option. Make sure the target is the armature, and select the hand you want it to be attached to as the bone subtarget. Click Set Inverse, and that's it. Once you have the animations down, you need to make it look like a real battle, and not just two dudes fighting by themselves. And so we come to making the armies. Making armies is not as complicated as it might sound. I'm going to start with the landscape add-on for Blender and set the preset to large terrain. Make sure to hit Ctrl and A to apply all transforms if you did any scaling. I'm going to add a plane, which is going to be the emitter for our army. Make sure to subdivide it in edit mode. Now, you could use geometry nodes for this, but I've tried both methods and this particle system seems to be simpler and it works better for me. Go ahead and import your soldier with the animation as an FBX. I used one that was rigged and animated in Mixamo because it's just the quickest for generic animations like walking that I don't want to motion capture. It won't have any materials on it if you import as an FBX, so just go ahead and reassign those by importing the original model, selecting the separate pieces, and hitting Ctrl and L, selecting Link Materials. Once all those are done, you can get rid of the original model and keep the FBX with the animation from Mixamo that now has your materials. Go back to the emitter plane, add a new emitter, and just rename it to whatever, or don't, I don't care. Now set it to hair and change the number to whatever you need for your scene as far as the amount of soldiers. Then make sure to go ahead and put your soldiers in a collection. You can do this with M and select new collection. Go back to our plane and scroll down to the render tab in the particle system and change the drop down from halo to collection and select the collection you've just made. At first it's going to look like, well, this. That's because it's taking every object in the collection and arbitrarily placing them throughout the scene. If you aren't having this problem, it's because your soldier is one mesh. You could select the whole collection, but that won't work either if you want to add multiple instances and varying walk cycles. So here's what we've got to do. We have to join all the separate meshes that make up the soldier into one. We can do that with Control and J, but hold up. If we do that, something weird happens to the materials on one of the objects. They just pretty much disappear, and we don't want that. The reason this is happening is that if we go to the Object Data Properties tab on the right and open up the UV map section, we can see that it's named Polysurface 53, etc. But this is different when we click on a different object. That means that we have different UV maps. When you combine them, Blender just has to pick a map and gets rid of the other. To fix it, just change the name of one of your maps to something that makes sense, and then copy it. After that, you can paste it onto every object on the soldier, and now you can join them, and all your materials will stay sane. Except these eyes. Don't mind these creepy eyes made of fabric. When we go back to the particle system, it's propagating them correctly. But there might be another problem. Although Blender handles instancing pretty well, you can really boost your playback by reducing the poly count on them. This model is pretty dense, but this one is mostly going to be in the background, so I'm going to reduce that by using a decimate modifier. It's in the modifier tab under generate. I found a value of about 0.2 worked in my case, but yours may vary. Make sure to apply the modifier with Control A while hovering over the modifier, or it won't play back very easily because Blender is having to calculate a bunch of things at once, and it doesn't like that. Now, the soldiers are there, but you might also see armatures, and that's because the particle system is instancing everything in the collection, not just the meshes. So, make sure to move your armatures into a separate collection. Also, if your armature's animation doesn't last your entire shot, just select it, go down to the timeline, and hit Shift E. Make sure to select Make Cyclic. That will extrapolate the animation and loop it forever. Great, now we have our soldiers marching very uniformly. Let's change that. Make sure you select the armature and the instance object mesh before you hit Shift D to duplicate, and then you can offset the animation by selecting all the keyframes in the timeline, hitting G, and just moving them around. Do that a few times, and now you have a more dynamic army. Also, quick tip, if your viewport is lagging, try changing the playback from play every frame to frame dropping. Okay, these guys are just marching on a flat plane, so let's fix that. We need them to deform to the landscape. If you go into edit mode, you can change the shape of the army. You can even duplicate faces and move them to the side to create cool flanks and formations. To stick it to the land, go to the modifier panel with the plane selected and pick the shrink wrap one under deform. Pick your emitter as the object and choose project from the wrap method. Also make sure you move the shrink wrap modifier above the particle one because it performs them in a linear fashion. So we want to stick it to the land and then instance the soldiers. Awesome. Now all we have to do is keyframe the plane's movement, and that will make the soldiers look like they're walking forward. Adjust the speed to fit the pace, and make sure you set the animation to linear by selecting the keyframes and hitting T, selecting linear. If they're doing any weird rotations, which they probably are, go to the emitter settings, check advanced, and go down to the rotation tab. Change the orientation axis to global Z and adjust the phase till they're facing the right direction. If you have the soldier's feet clipping through the ground, go into edit mode and give it some more subdivisions. If you don't want to see the emitter plane, go to the emitter render section and viewport display and untick show emitter in both. And there you go. Now about adding weapons and shields to your instances. Bring the weapon or attachment into the scene, and then make sure your UV map gets copied and pasted just like earlier. Then join them. If you play it back though, it's not doing anything. That's because we joined this object after the armature got rigged, so basically it doesn't know which bone should be controlling it. We can fix this by going into edit mode. Select all the faces on your weapon, and make sure to move it to the correct hand in edit mode because it might move. Go over to the vertex groups in the object data properties and select what group of mesh we want to attach the weapon to. In this case, it's the hand, so we select the vertex groups assigned to the hand, which in turn is controlled by the correct bone on the armature. If it looks weird or is clipping through your character, you might have to adjust the rotation of the weapon in edit mode, and that should translate to object mode as well. Then you can continue on and add variations of weapons and shields to your different instance objects. Another quick tip, this soldier has a spear but an animation like he's holding a sword. If he were a professional, he wouldn't do this. And I don't know about your soldiers, but mine are pros. So here's the fix. I'll go into pose mode on the armature and then select the forearm forearm because I want the motion of the shoulder and the elbow to remain the same. Now, you can delete the animation keyframes on the forearm, and same for the hand. And then you can go ahead and just adjust the forearm to the correct position. And now he's holding it correctly. You can do this to accommodate animations to your own respective weapons. Alright, that is the army. If you want an opposing army, duplicate the emitter plane and then make the particle system single user by hitting the little 2 button. You can also change the instance collection so it doesn't look like a country is fighting itself. Not that that's ever happened. Just make sure to also adjust the direction and animation keyframes. Animate them moving towards each other, and there you go. Finally, we can assemble all the pieces. We can take our animation of the main action and drop that in the foreground. In the midground, you can put some other custom animations of fighting and such. Of course, our background is the army we made. The ground can be finished pretty simply. Using a free add-on for Blender called Biome Reader, we can add textures and scatter grass throughout the scene pretty easily. And the background is, surprise, surprise, a plane. Cool. Before you export the whole thing in 8K resolution at 500 samples a frame, hold up. I would advise you to make some previs renders of your scene, especially if they involve heavy animation. That way you can spot any mistakes before you set your computer on fire for a week. The easiest way I've found to do this is make sure you have your output set so that it doesn't go into the nether realm. Hide all the unnecessary stuff and maybe set your output to a video file so you can watch it more easily. And then go into EV, go to View, and then select Viewport Render Animation. If everything looks a-okay animation-wise, render that bad boy out. I would highly recommend that you render out any complex project in several passes. That way, if one element just doesn't work, you don't have to render out everything again, just that little piece. Your render settings will depend on your scene, and your sample, noise threshold, and light bounces should reflect that. Get it? The light bounces should reflect that. I'm a genius. Anyway, that's how you can make epic battles in Blender. If you stuck around till the end, thanks for putting up with me. Make sure to go and like this video if you found it helpful, and be on the lookout for more content. Till the next one, God bless, and VFXpert out.